The title is Optimize Your Talent Strategy. So we'll move on to the actual substance. A little brief agenda here. We're going to have some introductions, tell you a little bit about each of ourselves. I'll talk to Dave about some specific things that are challenges in the recruitment area at the moment. With Alison, it's going to be more focused on development. And then at the end, as I say, we will have a Q&A session, a chance to ask questions and go either into a bit more depth on what we've discussed or perhaps cover some other areas that are of interest to people. So firstly, just a brief introduction to myself. I won't read everything out on here, but broadly speaking, I'm in the technical engineering scientific recruitment area. I run my own business after having worked in a couple of other recruiters, following on from a career in science and engineering. And I'm also an associate partner at Humanostics, which we'll talk about in due course. So moving on to our other presenters, Dave, do you want to talk about yourself?
Yeah, I just pressed the wrong button there. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everybody. As it says on the tin, my name's Dave Crumby. I am a certified practitioner in psychometrics, and I've spent the last 10 years supporting life science companies to hire the best talent in the UK and across Europe. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time on your Friday afternoon to spend with us. I've spent all morning trying to fix a leaking tap in the kitchen. And the one thing that I learned this morning is that recruitment and plumbing have something in common. If you don't try and fix it with DIY, leave it to the professionals.
Thanks, Dave. Nice little wise words there. Perhaps, Alison, you could give yourself a little introduction as well, covering some of the things on your slide.
Yeah, sure, Andy. Hello, everyone. So I focus very much in on the public sector. I do a lot of public sector change, mainly in the NHS and central government, but also local government. I tend to do quite a lot of organisational development, design, and something I'm starting to call organisational digitisation, where technology is starting to change how people learn, how people work, and how people even find their jobs. So on the right-hand side, a list of some of the clients and places I've worked on, various sort of consulting projects, or actually as a permanent member of staff. So lovely to meet you all, and look forward to talking to you later after the presentation.
Thanks for that, Alison. We'll move on now. I'm specifically going to be talking to Dave in the next section. So you obviously are in recruitment, particularly, Dave, as I mentioned, and the life sciences sector is your specialisation. In the current market, what are the biggest challenges for the clients that you're dealing with?
Yeah, that's a really good question to ask, Andy. And as you mentioned, I work specifically within the life sciences, and it's probably a good time just to mention that it's within the private sector. And the last 2 years have been an incredibly challenging time, both for life sciences and their recruitment, which has been a start, stop, start again affair.
Yeah.
So to answer this question, I conducted a series of surveys on LinkedIn, and my network was united in their response. And the biggest challenge, as you can see, it's reducing time to hire and the skill shortage. I'm curious as to what the biggest challenges are for our attendees today, and I'll post a survey later on for them to have their input as well. Because I just wanted to point out that it's not just the life science industry that are highlighting these two challenges. The same challenges are being echoed across all industries in the UK. According to a recent report by Total Jobs, only 50% of UK businesses are confident that they will recruit the people they need.
That's certainly true. In the kind of areas that I've mentioned I deal with, we're seeing the same kind of issues.
Yeah, I was wondering how that was going for you, Andy, because when I'm speaking with hiring managers, HR and talent acquisition, I can hear their frustration coming out. Their teams are being stretched, and we're hearing that hiring's taking up to 6 months. How about yourself? I mean, are you able to hold on to your candidates? How long is it before they start to lose interest?
Yeah, I mean, if clients aren't quick coming back to us with their feedback and quick to decide that they want to interview somebody, then the candidates can suddenly find they've got multiple opportunities to choose between. And if they've interviewed someone and don't quickly decide whether they want to offer them, again, the candidates can sort of be have something else on the table and decide to take what they've got rather than hang around waiting for what might be. So yeah, people need to move quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I'm shocked is actually it's only around 2 weeks before a candidate can start to lose interest, which when things are taking 6 months, all of a sudden you're going to be without quite a
There's
bit.
a big disjoint between the timescales there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of kind of reducing the time to hire for the companies that you have been working with, what solutions have you found that have been effective for you?
Yeah, well, I think it's important, first of all, to say that in the last 10 years, I haven't seen time to hire reduced. It's been hovering around of the 45 to 60 day mark. And while the recruitment funnel has remained consistent over this time, technology has been viewed as the silver bullet. Yet in most cases, technology has not been able to reduce the time to hire. So if technology has to be the answer, perhaps the solution can be found in the recruitment funnel. So at present, the focus is on the top of the recruitment funnel with talent pipelining, where companies are trying to build a database of candidates. Companies are investing in employer branding, recruitment marketing to entice candidates into their recruitment funnel, which in theory will save time on sourcing. Hiring managers are encouraged to be more visible in the communities they want to recruit from, with networking activities such as virtual coffee chats and non-interview conversations. I'm not sure about you, Andy. I mean, how do you think these conversations would go?
I guess that's tricky when you're kind of having conversations that aren't explicitly about recruitment, but you're trying to kind of build some sort of rapport. It can be challenging choosing the right kind of subjects to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, if a company was going to approach me and they wanted to have a chat with me and they asked me, why are you interested in working for us? I go, hang on a minute, you've knocked on my door. I used to say I'm actually interested. So I'm really intrigued how these conversations would go. So anyway, so what I've done is I've done some research into companies that have managed to significantly reduce their time to hire. I was curious what they did differently and to achieve this. And in my research, I found 2 great examples of companies who have reimagined their recruitment funnel to drastically reduce their time to hire. And so first up is Arla Foods. Are you familiar with Arla Foods, Andy?
I'm pretty sure I've seen their stuff on the supermarket and advertised on TV recently.
Yeah, have you seen the advert? The advert's pretty funny, actually.
This is the one with the singing farmers, isn't it?
Yeah, I know you like your karaoke, Andy. So
I told you that.
It's a song that you could. So anyway, for their graduate program, they receive thousands of applications each year. And over the past 4 to 5 years, they've been investigating how technology can augment their recruitment process. Their previous recruitment funnel was in line with most companies, which would entail sourcing, interviews, assessment centers with final selection.
Yeah.
And as part of their assessments, they'll use a range of psychometric tests, which include Hogan, Ravens, and Predictive Index. Their new optimized recruitment process now starts with sourcing and assessments with the use of cognitive and behavioral assessments to screen out more than 90% of the candidates. So if you could imagine, Andy, 1,500 candidates, and then you can instantly scale that down to 150 to then look through. You're going to be saving so much time.
Yeah, that's an awful lot of people to kind of, CVs to wade through. If you can kind of introduce anything to kind of do a first level screening to take some of them out, that's going to really help the time.
Yeah, so what they found that by measuring and assessing more data earlier in their recruitment process gives them more clarity and a shorter recruitment funnel. The second company I looked at was MotionStrun, who recently went through a period of rapid growth. And during this time, they had a massive overhaul to save money and to ensure that they were operationally and financially prepared to meet their growth. The team knew that streamlining their recruitment processes would be critical to their future success. And the most effective change they highlighted was introducing assessments earlier in their hiring practices. And whilst their goal was to save money, which they achieved, they also drastically reduced the time to hire and saved hundreds of hours of hiring managers and talent acquisition.
That's a win-win.
For any attendee, yeah, exactly. And for any attendees interested in learning more about these case studies, information can be found in the handout, which you can download. And so with both case studies demonstrates how measuring more relevant data early in the recruitment process relieves the time pressure at each stage, saves hundreds of staffing hours, improves interview ratios, saves money, and improves a better candidate experience.
Yeah. So you've talked about the kind of hiring metrics that have helped with your current clients. What are can you give us some examples of what they are?
Yes, I just want to point out that with the changing shifts in the workforce, roles are becoming much more complex. We are seeing a massive shift from the need for technical skills to a growing demand for soft skills. Yet these soft skills are difficult to measure and assess. And if I was to come to you and I say, I need a collaborator, I give you 100 CVs, choose 5 for me to interview, it's going to be tough, right?
Absolutely. How do you assess someone on that? Just looking at a CV?
Yeah, you can't exactly take out a rule and measure how collaborative someone is.
Even if somebody has it as a key point, how do you prove that they do?
Well, someone clever can actually tailor their CV or resume so it comes across as though they're collaborative.
Yeah.
So to make the best hire, you need to go beyond the traditional screening metrics and measure more earlier, such as motivational drives, attitudes and values, and cognitive capacity. Candidate assessment tools such as DISC, Hogan, and Predictive Index provide a panoramic insight by measuring what is beneath the surface. About a year ago, I chose to partner with Humanostics, who provide assessments by Predictive Index. I was amazed by the detail-rich reports that are generated from such a quick assessment. They are incredibly accurate, which my wife can attest to. So for any of our attendees interested in learning more, you'll be provided with a link to take the 6-minute assessment when the webinar ends.
Yeah, it's very quick and easy to do.
And so when it comes to predicting future performance, education, years of experience, and references all have a low predictive value, yet we rely on these for screening early in the recruitment process. Cognitive and behavioral assessments have a much higher predictive value, and when combined with interviews, provide the most effective method of predicting future performance. For me, hiring without the use of psychometric assessments is like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle with pieces missing and no picture on the box. It's not as fun, it takes longer, and when you're almost finished, you realize you have pieces missing.
Yeah. I'm surprised that education is such a low predictor. We have clients who will insist on people have got certain grades at A level, a certain kind of degree level at a particular Russell Group university, and yet that doesn't seem to be actually a particularly good predictor of how they're going to perform.
Yeah, it's the schools that gets me. You have to go to if you don't go to a certain school, university, you won't even be considered.
Yeah. So I think, thanks, Dave. We've covered some really good areas there. Appreciate that. Hopefully we'll have some questions coming through on what you talked about. So we're going to move on to discussing things with Alison now. Thanks for coming back on stage, Alison. Really just quite interested in knowing, because you clearly work in the public sector or on the private, that Dave and I do. So you're working with a number of clients on a consulting basis. What are the real skills challenges that you're seeing with them at the moment?
Well, very, very interesting question, Dave. And sorry, Andy, I was just thinking about what Dave was saying about the skills of tomorrow not being the skills of today. A friend of mine in government is actually looking at 20, 30 years ahead, trying to work out what the skills of tomorrow are going to be, what the jobs of tomorrow are going to be, so they can feed that back into the education system. So, you know, it's a massive project and a very difficult one to do as well. But I think back in the here and now, you know, given everything that happened yesterday, you know, the public sector is in a very, very strange place at the moment. You know, they were, prior to the Prime Minister resigning last night, you know, they were already having to look back at all their budgets, see where they could get efficiencies, see which projects and programs were going to go forward, and where they had the skills to do those. And for a long time, we knew that it's a massive skills shortage, both in central government and in the NHS and social care, where I work quite a lot, and it's right across the board. You know, I think there was a report out today saying the NHS alone needs the people the size of the population of Newcastle to join this year to plug the gap.
Numbers,
so there's a massive, yeah, just incredible.
I think, yeah, you talked about what happened yesterday. Since we started talking about this webinar and started putting it together, we've been through several prime ministers and possibly even more chancellors. So, you know, there can be quite high turnover in some occupations for sure.
Yeah, maybe they need to use a psychometric as well to choose their next leader.
Some interesting results in some of the people I've seen in power recently.
Wouldn't it just? But I think probably what I see as well in my clients is for those that are left trying to deal with all the work, of course, their workloads are going sky high. And particularly in the NHS, there's a lot of talk around lack of time to learn because they're so busy covering shifts and trying to do things differently to save time. But both in central government and local and the NHS and other areas I've worked, there has been for a few years actually a massive push to professionalise all the different functions. I mean, obviously clinicians and financial accountants, HR professionals to a certain extent have always been professional, but they've been professionalising policy work, professionalising estates management. But there has been maybe a little bit of attention lost on the soft skills that obviously are the ones that can be the make or break of a good performer. So
you can talk about those kind of soft skills in connection with the clients you're working with. How important are those soft skills for you and your clients?
Well, I think starting with my NHS and care clients, of course, you know, it is the care service. You know, it's endemic in what they do, that they know how to deal with people, how to interact with people, how to deal with very, very challenging, literally life or death situations. But as we've seen, sadly, all over the media, you know, bullying scandals and lack of leadership happens quite frequently. And I think there's something there in terms of how are we approaching, how we develop people for the senior roles. You know, are we really supporting them, providing the coaches and mentoring, helping them to understand how it is they lead and what behaviours might be more acceptable and better, higher impact than those that maybe they defaulted to in the past. I think it's a very, very different situation in central government, oddly, because over the last 10, 20 years, a lot of automation has happened and a lot of government services have gone online. You can get your driving licence online, your universal credit is all going online at the moment. So for a while, they've had an approach which looks very much at how do you work with other people, how do you work across government departments. Diplomacy is key, collaborative working is key. So they focus quite a lot on soft skills, and most people who reach the mid to high levels of the grading system have had some sort of psychometric, some sort of leadership development and some sort of coaching or mentoring. But I think it's a question really which impacts all of us in the UK, because if the people delivering our public services and leading our public services are supported better to develop, can lead teams more effectively, I mean, we all win because we get better public services at the end of the day. And
everybody uses at some point in their lives, some more than others. But yeah, it helps the whole country, doesn't it?
It does. It's worth investing in as much as those hard functional skills where, you know, NHS job ads, like Dave was saying, the experience, the qualifications, that's almost the must have. You don't get through the system unless, of course, you've got that technical qualification. But we need that softer qualification to be given as much importance as that, I think.
So we've talked about the use of psychometrics. I know that you've used it both for developing individuals as well as the teams within your organisations. What has been the personal experience you've had using those?
Well, I guess like many on the call, you know, I've tried out quite a few of them. The first time I came across them was in a emerging leaders thing that I did back in the day, back in the 90s, I think, where we were assessed using Myers-Briggs and Belbin, and that helped us to understand our style of leadership. And then personally doing an MBA in the early 2000s, we had an afternoon every Wednesday where they gave us a different psychometric to try out. And at the end of the course, we were sort of in bits all over the floor, working out how to put ourselves all back together again. But it was really, really good. And it showed you which psychometrics were good for what type of development.
So you've got experience of quite a few different psychometric tests.
Yeah. Yes, I think I've probably done most of them. Hogan, the Wave, Savile Wave, Myers-Briggs-Belbin, TMS, Insights. You know, I've personally done a lot of them myself. So I tend to quite like, I see it as a bit of a market where I can choose which one's appropriate for my consulting clients as well, because I've used a mix of psychometrics when, for instance, a few years ago, bits of the NHS were reorganising and we were merging teams from about 7 different regions. And I used psychometrics there to help the team understand and get to know each other quickly, because they had to build, bond and deliver very quickly indeed, because it's obviously so fast paced in the NHS, and they're a key part of what I do in the consulting world. But I came across Predictive Index when I was at Virgin. I was their VP for OD for a little while, and Virgin used Predictive Index to both recruit, profiling the job that they want to recruit to, and asking everybody that applies to do the Predictive Index assessment. And then they match and wheedle down to a shortlist. And then within the organisation, we used it to help develop people, build teams. It became a very common language. So I became a fan of it, because at Virgin, we used to say it's like magic.
You can see the benefits both on the recruitment side and on the team development once people have joined the company there.
Yeah, and it was so quick and easy to do. And you got loads of reports back. And, you know, it helps you put teams together and develop teams to work more cohesively, making sure you had the right mix in the team. So I became a huge fan, which is why afterwards I decided, when I was approached, to become a partner for Humanostics and Predictive Index. And I think one of the other questions, which I put this slide up, is who else is using it? Because I hadn't seen it at all in the UK prior to that. I was quite amazed, because it was so good. And you can see some of the brands that are using it. I honed in on IKEA and Hennies down there, but also this one over here, Manchester United are using it. So quite a lot of British football clubs are using Predictive Index, which is quite an eye-opener. And I asked Humanostics back in Denmark, what was that all about then? And they said, well, it's actually the Manchester United Football Academy, but it's players as well as admin staff. So just to reassure any United fans, they don't use this to pick the team, but what it is used for onboarding and choosing how to coach the players and the staff. So I thought that was quite an interesting use of it. And it seems over in America, there are quite a lot of American football teams. The Miami Dolphins use it, the Raiders. So it's something that when you look at the brands on here, you think, oh, that's quite a broad church, isn't it? There's quite a lot of different types of organisations.
There's kind of technical companies. There's, you know, more sort of soft skills stuff like the kind of football. You know, it's not people with specific kind of qualifications. It's people who can kind of control a ball, and you know, but they need to also be able to fit within the team personality-wise, and the club needs to understand what their kind of driving motivations are.
Absolutely right. I mean, you've probably seen, I mean, your market tends to be more sort of the engineering field, doesn't it? Have you seen psychometrics used much in that field at all?
I mean, it's a little, but there's certain companies who I deal with who use things quite regularly as part of their recruitment process, and I think it has good results. But there's a lot of them have maybe thought about it, and it's never been seen as a priority. There always seems to be something else. There's a kind of salary review that they get busy with, and they never seem to quite get round to it. So I'm hopefully trying to kind of show them what can be done, how it can really help them. And you know, it's a process of just kind of informing people and showing them by actually trying out the tests how quick they are and how useful the results are that the reports are generating.
I mean, it's perfect, isn't it, for busy teams? You know, a 6-minute questionnaire, 8 questions that give you that real snapshot of amazing who you are and how you operate, how you like to be managed, how you manage others. It's a really, really great
I don't think I've used as many different things as you in the past. I mean, in various jobs I've joined, I have done different psychometric tests, and they've generally given similar kind of output in terms of looking at my personality and my capabilities. Some of them have taken quite a bit longer to actually complete than the predictive index one did. So the fact that it can give a common output with other ones that have taken quite a bit longer to complete, I think is a real tribute to how good it is. Well, thanks very much for time, Alison. Was there were the kind of closing comments that you wanted to cover for your area?
Yes, yeah, that's good. Yeah,
fantastic. Well, so thanks very much, Alison. So we've spoken both with Dave about the private sector and with Alison more about the kind of public sector that she deals with. Just really summarising what we've discussed between the three of us, that time to hire is shortening. Labour markets are tight at the moment. So it's really critical to the success of companies that they get those metrics quickly. Soft skills are very important. Equally important as the functional qualifications that, technical degrees and that kind of things that the candidates might have. They really need to get that right so that the recruitment and the development of staff for roles is handled effectively. And finally, speaking a common language such as predictive index really can help to develop teams. It can actually be an enjoyable process. It doesn't have to be a chore like some things can be, if it takes a long time. This is so quick. The kind of positive outputs it gives, I think, are really, people do appreciate it. And we mentioned about the global brands there at the end. It's got a great track record. So I think really just summarizing it, it's, there's some very, very positive things that have come out from our early experiences with predictive index. So thanks, people who've been listening, who've not contributed so far. I know there's been a little bit of chat. So we've now at the point where we're going to have a little bit of a Q&A. So I think we've got some polls to look at some point, which Dave's put up. And I think there were some, questions perhaps asked in the chat that we can look at. So obviously you've been in the background, Dave. Thanks for handling things while Alison and I were talking. You see, we've got a particular question to deal with now.
Yes, it's a great question from Courtney. And seeing as your background's in engineering, Andy, I wonder if you want to have a crack at answering this. So as we were talking about recruitment, especially when it comes to when you're trying to filter through thousands of applicants, what about the flip side when you only have a handful of applicants? How can these types of assessments help?
That is a challenge, because I guess you might think that any assessment is going to reduce the pool of candidates from what you have, and if the pool you start with is small, then you might think, oh, well, I don't even want to kind of assess people because it might make me exclude people, and I've then got hardly anyone to choose from. I mean, I think ultimately that there's probably a subject for another webinar there, talking about how we actually generate candidates, the kind of issues around producing sufficient numbers to then actually assess them through both things like predictive index and interviews. Clearly, just introducing a kind of metric like this isn't going to increase your candidate pool. It's not a kind of magic wand like that. But I think that's something that we really would have to probably talk about in more detail in another webinar. I mean, have you got any thoughts on that, Dave, from kind of having been thinking about it in the background?
Yeah, I've had a good chance. I was actually typing frantically and then decided it might be easier just to talk about it. And although I've used it as an example to help you to filter through, the opposite can be true as well, in that you can actually use it as an inclusive tool. And I remember doing an exercise where we were given very much a real life situation, a bunch of CVs or profiles to go through. And based on those profiles, you then chose which ones you'd want to interview for the role. And then you chose which ones you wanted to interview. And then at the end of that, you then asked them to do a behavioral assessment. And then you realized, actually, the people I filtered out at the start based on their behavioral assessments would be a much better fit than the ones we took through to an interview. And so I think by doing them earlier, and especially if you're very set on the type of profile you're looking for, I think you can actually use it as a tool to actually help to include and to, I guess, if you're going back to the hiring manager to justify why they should be considering these extra candidates. I'm not an engineer, so excuse my ignorance. I presume there's a ton of technical skills you're going to need. But when it comes to that, if you can break down these skills into both hard skills and soft skills, and if you're going to be realistic about what hard skills can be learned in a reasonable time period, then perhaps that shouldn't be used as a reason why someone should be picked.
I think that's a good point, Dave. Actually, you mentioned kind of inclusivity. People might be excluding someone on the basis of not having been to the right college or not having the right A-level grades. But actually, if they ignore that at the start, get everyone to get profiled, and then look at their profiles before you even think about that, you might actually realize, as you said, that people are, very capable of doing that job. They've got the right aptitudes, and they would be good at learning the things that they need to learn, and ignore the fact that they don't have that particular grade or having been at the right alma mater.
Nick's got a great response.
I was thinking too, I was having a conversation with an IT recruiter yesterday, and of course IT skills are very, very rare at the moment, and we were talking about program directors who are even rarer, like gold dust. But a lot of people are having quite a lot of trouble with some of the program directors that they're hiring, because their attitude to management of people isn't as it should be. And so I think something like a psychometric coming in earlier into the recruitment process, that person may show up with their MSP and their Prince 2 qualifications, but if they're walking all over people, leaving them feeling like mashed potato and wrecking the reputation of your company when you're putting these people into your projects, there's something going very badly wrong there. But a step back, a bit of a pause, use the psychometric to assess the soft skills as much as their technical skills would probably be very wise, and time spent wisely.
Thanks very much for that question, Courtney.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else to add on that one, Dave?
Just what Nick's actually said in the comments, which makes perfect sense. So a must-have tool that Humanostics provide is the safety style inventory, which for industrial environments where HSE is so mission critical, e.g. oil, gas and shipping, etc., it spells out in clear terms if your candidate is likely to follow the rules, even when no one is watching, or is included to take shortcuts, etc. Stamp out lost time incidents at the recruitment stage. It's a great point. And often you'll find, especially with smaller companies, and if you've got someone relatively high up who's going to be recruiting, I'll often look for someone similar to themselves who they build a natural rapport with. But often you'll find that the role would actually need someone completely different, and these behavioural assessments can help to support that.
Good stuff.
It's a really good point. I was just thinking that links into the one element of the assessment is around attitude to risk, and I think Nick has just identified that. And I have to admit, I'm what they call a promoter in the PI assessment, and my risk appetite is rather high. So I would just not be at all suited for this sort of role. But promotion, I end up going on over to a lot of exhibitions and doing a lot of interviews in the media. So that is my natural space. And I think a lot of what comes through is how sensible it is as well. It's good fun to do, but we all have certain types when we do the psychometric assessment that Predictive Index have. And it really does help you choose which roles to actually go for, as much as the recruiter choosing whether you're right for their role.
Whether something might be kind of within your comfort zone or so far out of your comfort zone that it's going to be a real challenge for you.
Yes, indeed.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for that question, Courtney. I can't see any other questions at the moment on the chat unless I've missed anything. Dave or Alison, is there anything else that we spotted? Were there any other kind of areas that you wanted to talk about? Any other thoughts that, following the chats we've had? Dave, there's any other things that you want to bring up?
The only thing I was going to add is I really like the point that Alison raised, that it provides a common language that can be used. And the same is true when it comes to a recruitment process, and it gives the recruiters the tools they need to be able to actually communicate what they need to say. And often as a recruiter, one of the feedback you'll get is, oh, we just didn't have the right chemistry. And it's like, I can't go back to my candidate with that. What do you mean didn't have the right chemistry? Push and push, and they can't really understand that. It's like And whereas with assessments such as with the behavioral assessment with predictive indexes, it gives you the jargon and the terminology that can be used collectively to help give really good feedback for people to take on board.
You've got some objective measures by which you can say, this is what they need, this is where you were, and this is why it wasn't right, rather than just a sort of vague kind of hand-waving response like you mentioned at the start.
Yeah.
How did you two find doing the assessments, and what did you come out as? Did it feel right for you? If you're willing to share.
I mean, I'm an altruist. I don't think I'd mentioned that to date, that's my profile. I think it's called different things in the other tests that I've done in the past. It really means more about that I'm always wanting to make sure that everyone is kind of able to contribute and able to do their best. And I think, I'm very much, I'm not kind of focused totally on my own thing. I want to sort of make sure that everyone is kind of has what they need to perform at their best. And, anything I can do to help them, whether it's kind of coaching them on a particular bit of software or just explaining something to them that they may not have totally understood, that, it's very much kind of, a reflection on how I probably see myself. If you are self-analytical and you think about how you behave in a work and in a social environment sometimes, a lot of the things that come up on that altruist profile are pretty much bang on for how I am.
Yeah, that's something everyone says. It's that comment. It's absolutely bang on, spot on to what I am. And having worked with you for a little while, I know I can see that's completely spot on as well. So it's so accurate. And that's the thing that sort of always came across to me as I was doing, it's so accurate. How can we now help use this to help put teams together? Because once you've used, I think there's a product they've got called Team Design. You can assess individuals' predictive index type, and then look at what type of team you are by putting everybody together. So, in the NHS, you might be quite understandably a caregiving team, but if you're being told to go out and bring in, more business or cut back on suppliers, you may need a very different type of team. It might need to be a bit more hard hitting. So then you can have a discussion about how you supplement the team or bring new people in.
And on a kind of a simple level, you can look at two people and see how they're potentially going to work together, whether there are aspects of their personalities that are going to clash, and then how you would address those things to prevent those kind of clashes becoming a problem in day-to-day work.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave? What was your kind of feeling on that? How your profile came out?
Yeah, it was incredibly accurate, and I really couldn't believe it, and I had to be honest with myself about what it was saying. And one of the things that come out as a persuader is I like to start and initiate things. I've always got my eye on the future and like to get projects going and so forth. And so when I had to hire an intern over the summer to help me out, I purposely didn't try and hire someone similar to myself. I actually went to look for someone who could actually finish what I started and put the, as you know, when I sent you the slides, my attention to detail isn't great. And so I needed someone to be able to go in and dot my I's and cross the T's and finish things off.
It's about complementary skills so that these things balance out and all the areas are covered.
Absolutely.
And I guess that's one of the reasons, I guess the football teams, both in the UK and America, use it, because that's the essence of a football team, isn't it? The complementary skills. You don't want the goalie running up the pitch to take a hit, do you? Take a hit at the goal,
Unless you're in the last minute of extra time on a cup game, I guess. But I'm sure they've looked at that on the Manchester United analysis of their programs.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. That doesn't pass any comment on their performance as a team at the moment. But I'm sure putting the right people in the right places, even in the back office, I'm sure must have helped them in terms of understanding how the mix is going to work.
And keeping kind of hold of good players, because, sometimes players get upset, because the way the manager manages them or the kind of way they interact with their teammates. If you can anticipate those kinds of problems and, it's somebody you do want to hang on to, hopefully you can address those things in good time to stop it coming to a head.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking too. I think it's going to be good for some of my clients that put quite major sort of electronic and digital projects together that last for several years, you know, using something like this at the beginning to help form the team and look at where the challenges might be, or where they've got too many of the same type, you know, where that is going to lead the work, I think is really, really good to do early on. And then as people do move through, you can make sure that you're plugging the gaps as you go along by using something like a predictive index to bring in the new people that you want to join the team, and don't just default to, well, you know, program directors and solution architects or nurses and doctors are in short supply. We just get anyone in. You've got to get the right people in.
Well, Alison and Dave, thanks very much for sharing your thoughts today. It's been hopefully insightful for those that joined the webinar. Obviously, what we're going to do now when we finish, this will be, having been recorded, we'll be sharing it online so that anyone who couldn't attend today can watch, and hopefully then they can get involved with any future webinars that we hold and interested in knowing what subjects people might want to be covered. So thanks very much to both of you. Thanks from me for those people who contributed. It's been a really interesting webinar, and I hope everyone's found it is thought-provoking. What will happen now is that there will be a landing page which will have all our contact details. If anyone wants to get in touch with us, they can find all the details and click on links there.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.